Here's a tutorial on how to fit a prosthetic nose. Okay, so you've firstly got to make sure the area that you're applying the prosthetic to is clean. So you can use this either via a micellar water or a toner, or alcohol's really good for getting rid of any oil or dirt. So as you can see here, I'm just removing it all from the area that I'm going to apply the prosthetic. Just taking the time to make sure that there's any oil or dirt is rid of, because obviously I'm quite oily skinned, so it's important that area is quite dry. I'm just going over with a clean cotton pad just to make sure that any residue from the cleanser is removed. So now here's the prosthetic. So you can see around the very edges it's very, very thin. So you don't want to trim those because they're what are going to blend straight into the skin. So you're just going to try and fit it to your nose and see how it fits for size. This is slightly large for my nose, but you want to make sure that the holes fit with your nostrils, just to make sure that there's no restriction on breathing or anything like that. So you're just going to try it on for size, make sure it fits nicely and it holds onto the face nicely. And what you're going to do to get the shape before you adhere this to the skin, you're going to apply a powder around the outside edges. And what this will do, when you remove the nose from the face, it'll leave you with an outline as to where you need to apply your adhesive. So you can do this with a little powder brush and some loose powder, just all the way around the edge of the prosthetic. The beauty of doing this is that powder will just rub away easily, so you're not using any pens or anything that's going to stay in the skin. So what you're going to do now, you're going to take some Prosthetic and your long Q-tip and you're going to apply that around the outside, just on the inner edge of that guideline from the powder. And you're going to do that all the way around the outside of the nose and underneath towards the nostrils as well. But don't go inside the nostrils because you don't want to inhale this. Okay, and just wait for that to go tacky, and whilst you're waiting for that to go tacky you can start to apply the Prosthetic to the inner part of the nose. So don't go right to the edges, just leave around a ½ centimetre gap and you're going to apply the Prosthetic all around the inside of the prosthetic. Just take extra time and make sure there's no large drips, just a nice thin layer. And once you've got that completely covered, you can start to apply to the skin. Now take extra care with this and hold the very tip of the nose so there's no folds or anything like that. You can just place it directly onto your nose. Okay, don't push it on too hard, kind of let it fall onto the nose. Okay, and just use your fingertips to adjust it slightly. It might take a little while just fiddling around, just making sure that it feels okay. You'll be able to feel that it feels okay. I mean, you will feel that there's something on your face, but you will know if it feels like it's fitted properly. I'm just taking the other end of the long Q-tip now just to help it into place. Sometimes your fingers can get a little bit stuck if the adhesive's on show, so it's really handy to have something very small and thin like this. As you can see, I'm just taking time just to ensure that it is all down in one place. And then I'm taking the other side again, back to the Prosthetic, and I'm just making sure that the underneath, I'm just tucking that in underneath, just to make sure that it's tucked under. sorry, not tucked under, adhered to the skin properly. Because sometimes the underneath, because your nose moves around a little bit because you're talking, or your top lip moves, so that adhesive might come away a little bit. Again, just holding it in place. And as you can see, I'm just using the fingertips again just to push it into place. And you can see that my nostrils line up with the prosthetic nostrils really well, so there's no restriction in breathing. Okay, what I'm going to do now is back to the Pros-Aid, and I'm going to seal in the edges, similar to what you would do with a bald cap. So with the Q-tip, I'm just going to apply the Pros-Aid very thinly around the edge of the prosthetic, and that's going to seal in the prosthetic edges, and that's going to be the beginning part to our blending. So that's going to be the stage 1 to our blending. What that will do, that will give longevity to the prosthetic, so it will ensure that it lasts longer, but it will also begin that blending process. I'm just taking my time, particularly around the nostrils, just making sure that that's sealed in nicely. Okay. Just got a little sponge there on hand, just in case I had a little drip around the nostril, so just to buff that out slightly and just get rid of the drip. You can work slightly onto the prosthetic as well with the Pros-Aid if you've got a build-up. It'll just add a little bit of texture to the nose. It is quite tricky applying a nose prosthetic. If you were just applying a flat scar to the skin or a flat wound, it is a lot easier to blend out. Okay, so now I'm going to take my hairdryer and I'm going to dry that down until it starts to become clear. Okay, and once that's nice and clear, I'm just touching it to check that it's not too tacky. If it's too tacky, then it's not quite dry enough. Okay, now I'm going to move on to latex. And you're going to apply the latex with a sponge very thinly. You're going to apply a very thin amount to the very edge of the prosthetic, and this is where we start to blend into the skin. So it builds up a layer around the edge of the prosthetic that allows the prosthetic to melt into the skin. And because our prosthetic is latex and we are using latex, it matches to the actual prosthetic, so it gives a more realistic effect to the skin. So I'm just gently applying that to the very outer parts of the prosthetic and directly onto the skin. You can blend it out onto the skin as well. You can move it further out if you find that you're getting any lines building up, and back onto the prosthetic as well. Very similar, again, to how you would apply a bald cap. Don't forget the underneath. That does need to be adhered and blended very well underneath, because if you're on stage or an actor's moving around or talking a lot, the top lip moves, so you don't want that to become loose. You will be able to see the edges of the prosthetic and where you might need some more latex just to build up that level of blending. Sometimes if the edges are quite thin, they can sort of roll back on themselves, which do need extra blending, so just be careful of that. Again, taking the hairdryer, and I'm going to dry until clear. As we know from the process of making ball caps, we need to ensure that the latex is clear whilst before we move on. Here I just discovered that I probably need a little more a few more layers on a few of the areas, so I'm just looking up close in a mirror to identify that. And I'm just adding some more latex with my sponge to those areas. As you know, latex can dry quite quickly if you're in a warmer environment, so just be careful that you don't keep revisiting or going over the same area whilst it's still tacky. As you know, it'll start to pluck and little holes will start to appear, as we learned when ball cap making. Okay, again, just showing you that I'm getting right underneath there, and I could actually really feel that now adhering to underneath, so you can actually feel the security of it as well. Again, back on with the hairdryer. And just make sure as well that it's not too hot. Okay. Towel's falling off there, guys, do apologise. Okay, that feels good. So, final step now is to powder. So to take any shine off, any slight remaining tackiness, and powder that into place. Obviously, because the prosthetic is a slightly different colour to my face, you will still visibly see the joins, but as long as you don't feel the joins, that is the main thing. Because by the time you put makeup on, they won't be visible. And just one final check. And there you have it, a prosthetic nose application, ready for makeup.